Hello book friends, Terry from Terry Talks Books or Ms. Terry B here on YouTube. Today I'm going to be doing a book review of something I read in September, but before I get going on that, I want to make a little addendum to my birthday book haul because I got a book in the mail yesterday. It's a mystery who it is from, but it is for my birthday. So I wanted to mention it here since in case it's one of you. So I will honor the fact that somebody didn't want to identify themselves, at least not yet, and sent this book off to me. But I did want to say thank you. So thank you to whoever sent this book to me. And the book that was sent, this person has to know me fairly well. It's The Bald Eagle, The Improbable Journey of America's Bird by Jack E. Davis. So many of you may know that I like to read nature writing, that I like nature. Some of you will know that I love the American bald eagle, and I watch the Eagle Nest cams every year. I have several that I watch on the regular, and then whenever I get the chance, I will go out to see what I can see in real life, not on a cam. So I know where some of the nests are in the area, and will go out with my binoculars and see what I can see. So this was pretty perfect, and it was published in 2022. So somebody was either taking a chance or they knew that I didn't have this book. So again, thank you to whoever sent this lovely book to me. Here's the title page. Can you see the little babies right there? So anyway, I will look very much forward to reading this. It covers an awful lot of territory regarding the American bald eagle, and some of it very sad and very heart-wrenching, and some of it just absolutely hopeful and beautiful. So, and there's a bunch of pictures in the middle. There's a section with various photographs and such. This one is from, it's a little eaglet that looks to be about 2 years old. Not 2 years, 2 weeks old. And the photo's from 1934. Look at that. Look at that. And then of course we have our little bandits, more recent photo right up here. They're a little bit younger, but they still have their natal down and have that kind of dark strip across the eyes that makes them look like they have little bandit masks on. So anyway, thank you again very much to whoever sent this to me for my birthday. Well done. So what book am I going to be talking about for my review today? I'm going to be talking about The Mighty Red by Louise Erdrich. I read this in September with Britta Bowler. Britta and I have had a Louise Erdrich reading project going on for the last few years. I'm not sure, 3 years? I'd have to go back and look, but let's just say about 3 years. And we started at the beginning and we read through her catalog of novels. And then when we ran out, we decided to keep the reading project going. Since Louise Erdrich is still writing and publishing, we thought that whenever a new book comes out, we would buddy read that together. So as long as Louise Erdrich keeps writing, we'll have a buddy read, Britta and I. So this book was published in 2024. So I've been sitting on it for a little bit. Not too long, but I have been sitting on it for a little while. So anyway, got that read in September, and let me tell you a little bit about this. The setting is the Red River Valley in North Dakota, and either it wasn't clear or I didn't pay close enough attention. I don't know if they're on the res or not. Not sure about that. But it's the Red River Valley in North Dakota, and the Red River is a pretty mighty river, the Mighty Red, a very mighty river that runs for quite the distance, and it runs north. So I know when we think, we typically think of a river running south. It's just, it, it's just kind of built in to many of us that a river would run south or something, I guess. So it always seems interesting to me when a river runs north. I think the Nile runs north. So anyway, this goes up into Canada, and now I can't remember. Does it start here in North Dakota, and then keep running north over the border? I am not sure. But anyway, that is the physical location setting, and the time setting. It takes place in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. So that is the setting for it. Do I have any other notes on that? No, I don't think so. And the content, the themes, the thing it's about, the elements, however that might be described, are pretty typical Erdrich. And they have to do with things like yearning and community and family. There's love and there's struggle and there's secrets and there's tragedy and there's humor and there's loneliness and there's hope. So she gets an awful lot into her books, but that's pretty typical Erdrich to put things like that in. This one has also an environmental aspect. So besides the above elements, it has a geography at its center, and it's not front and center, but it is there, and it is an important piece of the story. But I don't know as though I would categorize this as cli-fi, climate fiction. Not sure I would do that. It's just very nicely blended in, and because we're dealing with tribal people and their attachment to land and their appreciation for it, it's very appropriate that would be involved in the various themes throughout the book and just become a fairly important element, even if it's not front and center. The main focus is on 3 young people who are about to graduate high school. Now, this is not my favorite. I do like coming of age stories, but it needs to be done really well for me to appreciate it. And there are a number of books out there that do that. So I do appreciate a coming of age story, and this is a coming of age story, but I don't tend anymore to really seek out books where the main characters are high school or just out of high school, young adults. I don't tend to enjoy those as much anymore. The themes usually are, I'm bored of them. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm old. I don't know. But it's just not my favorite thing to read about anymore. So I was a little bit concerned about that, but it turned out okay. And there are a lot of additional characters they're not just background characters, they are a part of it. It's kind of like, the whole community. And so you have people of many different ages, and even if they're not the main focus of the story, they play a prominent enough role that it doesn't come off as just, a YA book or something like that. So that is the basics. I already mentioned that it's a coming of age drama. I didn't call it a drama, but it's a coming of age drama involving a love triangle, which I guess I didn't quite expect that. And it's a pretty interesting love triangle, and of course the way Erdrich blends that in with other elements that I'll get to, in a little bit. It's it's just interestingly done, as is just about everything Erdrich does. Is you might see a synopsis of one of her books and go, yawn, but don't do that. Don't do that. She somehow can deal with a lot of the same elements, and she puts her own twist on it and her own spin on it, and it's just lovely. So anyway, we have the typical Erdrich themes going on, but there is so much more. It's really also a portrait of a farming community, and this community dealing both as a community and individually dealing with change. This takes place over a fair period of time. The majority of it takes place in like 2008, 2009, and then we end up in towards the end 2012, and then at the very end 2024. So that is kind of an interesting thing that she does. And so you can see some of the change within the people, within the environment, within the community. So it is a portrait of all of that, dealing with change, also depletion, dealing with things like the depletion of the soil from the sugar beet crops. Early on, she wrote a book called The Beet Queen. And so we learn from that about the sugar beet farming that goes on in the areas, pardon me, where Erdrich sets some of her books here. So that was kind of interesting that it shows up, and the focus on this one is not so much on the beets as it is about farming techniques and what this crop does to the soil, to the and to the future. What does this say for the future as this is happening? So we have the depletion of the soil from the sugar beet crops, also the toxic herbicides and pesticides that are throwing off the ecological balance, that gets tossed in there. So we definitely have a real sense of geography, but we also have a real sense of the environment and environmental issues without it being just like in your face and smacking you upside the head. So I really did appreciate that, because I think it's something that's very important. And the way she goes about addressing it and some of the conclusions and things that her characters end up doing, I thought was very interesting to me, and to look at things. She didn't specifically call it this, but things like, regenerative farming and things like that. I find that very interesting. The community issues, okay, where am I getting into the criticism? There is a criticism I want to make on this, because overall I liked it, but there was something that bothered me. So we have these community issues, and at the heart of all of this is something underneath the surface, and we don't know what it is. There's some tragedy, some horrific loss that affected individuals, that affected the community as a whole, but we don't know what it is. And it's kind of blended in with the financial crisis. That is one of the community issues, but there's something more going on. There's some tragedy, some loss involving loss of life. We pretty quickly, I think, catch on that something has happened, and included death. And it took Erdrich, I can't remember now, it took her, what, 2/3, 3/4 of the book before we actually find out what that is. And it was very distracting for me, because she wasn't really even feeding us little hints and clues, not enough to really know, something's going on. And there's something very unsettling about that. So as the reader, sometimes we know a little bit, we know some things, even if it's a big secret, but as the reader, we are clued in at least somewhat. Now, it might not get resolved, or we may not fully know. There may be a twist, things like that. But she just waited and waited and waited and waited. And it was, like I said, very distracting for me, because it kept me from knowing what, and focusing on were the main things I should be thinking about and paying attention to in this book, because she includes a lot that maybe is a little bit a part of the criticism. Is she covers quite a bit, and there are maybe too many. Where did I write that down? How did I word that? I'm not seeing it right off. So there are so many things going on. So I think it leaves the reader a little confused. Now, I will say this about it, that was it intentional? I'm not sure if it was intentional on her part or not, but I will say if it was intentional, it did give a sense of the seriousness of the effect on the individuals and the community, and how sometimes things happen, whether it's within a small group, a family group, or a wider community, and we just don't talk about it. There's maybe bitterness and resentment or fear, and we don't talk about it. It's so hurtful that we don't talk about it. So was she trying to use that as a tactic to try to draw the reader in? If she was, I'm not sure it was completely successful. It didn't feel like it to me. That's really, I would say, the main criticism I have of the book, because overall I really, really did enjoy it. And the things that I'll praise are things like the beautiful poetic passages sometimes, and I'm going to come back and talk about that, because I want to read something. It's called The Vesper Flight, and she has strong themes, and I love the strength of her themes, the importance of her themes. They're always strong, they're always important. There is a touch of the supernatural, as there would be within the various tribal communities. So I'm more familiar with, say, the Navajo Nation and things that go on there having to do with the supernatural. And supernatural doesn't necessarily have to be, kind of scary or spooky things. It can just be the connection with nature, or a sense of intuition and things like that. So she definitely brings that in. I always appreciate that, but it's more of a touch of it. I didn't think any of it was very heavy-handed, or is kind of like when I talk about magical realism, and I will usually tell you whether there was a light touch or a heavy touch with that particular book or that particular author with that element. So this one was just a touch. And then, of course, the hope. And it's just always so beautiful. And I'm not sure if I can think of an Erdrich book where there isn't this sense of hope, even in the midst of tragedy, even in the midst of this something awful, or within the community, or this financial crisis that we all experienced. It even within that, there's always a sense of hope there, and I truly appreciate that. Now I'm going to go back to this, what I thought was a very beautiful passage, and the chapter is called Vesper Flight. And it just shows her ability to get this kind of really poetic narrative going. And let's see, I'll turn a little bit towards the light. That will help some. Okay, Vesper Flight. We're at an event, a gathering, and one of our characters, Eric, said to the young lady, Kismet, "Bring your chair over here. I want to show you something." They took their lawn chairs over to the prairie field that Eric and his dad had been working on for years. Barn swallows, tree swallows, swifts were plucking insects off the tops of the flowers and grasses. The sun was low, and the light was a golden barge floating through the trees. "Now, just watch," Eric said. As the heat rose off the earth, the insects rose too, and the black arcs of birds began to feed with such swiftness and intensity that Kismet's eyes could scarcely follow. They outflew their shadows, veered so close and at such a rate of speed it seemed at every second they would collide, but only their shadows merged and came apart. Their intricate blur of flight rose to a frenzied joy so dark and dazzling that Kismet was lost in emotion. She sat under a spell. By the time the air cooled and the swallows began to swoop away to their nests, she felt wobbly and strange, as though she too had been flying. Eric's dad called him over, but although the mosquitoes were avid, she didn't leave. She continued to sit there alone. The light softened and shadows crept out of the trees. The evening breeze in green twilight set up a soft clatter in the cottonwoods. She gasped suddenly, for pain shot through her at the widening arc of her knowing. She had seen a lot by now. The deadened dirt, the perfect row crops without bugs or weeds. She had talked to Diz about how this perfection was accomplished. She could see it now. Practically everything she and the Geis did, and even her mother's job, was destroying what she had just witnessed, the joinery of creation. I thought that was incredibly beautiful. And I thought she really drew an amazing picture there, and she captured, if you've read the whole thing, she really captures the difference between the way farming is being done, and you have this single crop again and again and again, and it's depleting the soil, and the pesticides, the herbicides, so they look kind of perfect when you look at them. You don't see bugs, you don't see weeds. And there are other issues surrounding that, but what it's really doing is wearing out the land and poisoning. And then there is this family, and Eric is a part of that family, where they are trying to send a lot of the land back to its natural state with its ebbs and its flows and regeneration, and bringing in other crops besides sugar beets. They're doing some other things instead of just cashing in constantly on the sugar beets. And the difference that when she describes this through in the book in different places is really fairly powerful. It is to me, and it just shows the difference. And it reminds me a little bit about a few books that I have read by British authors who have been letting various parts of their land go back to nature, and not necessarily so wild and untended that it's not useful in some way, or unapproachable in some way, but to bring back some of the natural grasses and that feed, it's an entire ecosystem, and various animals feed off of that, and will keep, and insects and birds, and they rely on these things, and we come along and do our agricultural thing and till the land and do this and that, and make money off of it, and then, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but everything's off balance, everything's off kilter. And so it reminded me a little bit about some of those things that I have read in the last few years that talk about that. And then in my own area where I live, there are farms and people who do a lot of regenerative farming. So I just find that fascinating. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts on The Mighty Red by Louise Erdrich, and let me know below if you've read this. Have you read other Louise Erdrichs? If you haven't gotten to this one yet, have you read any of her other works? I think that her books have more power and more appeal if you maybe just start at the beginning and just start reading through her novels and get a sense of her and her writing and the themes the themes that she writes about. And I mean, you can read this. There's no reason you can't read this without having, you don't have to read her other works before you read this. And I don't think most of her books you could read as standalones. But I would encourage encourage you to do that. But I am curious who's read Erdrick and or who's read The Mighty Red, and what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did I give you anything to think about that maybe would make you want to go back and reconsider if it didn't quite work for you? Sometimes my talking about a book, looking at it, leaving a little space, thinking about it and looking at it again. And then when I sit down to talk about it, sometimes it gives me, I give myself my own moment and think, maybe that was better than I thought. So it's not, I don't think it's her best. And I'm curious what you think about that, but let me know. Let me know in the comments below. Let's chat. Talk to you later, book friends.